We didn't see the beach. I saw the water.
Well, compared when the beach now compared to this is definitely a nicer beach.
Is it quiet though?
Yeah, this is quiet.
Okay.
Compared to the beach in the past.
Oh, good.
So when we after the coconut trees, if you guys straight to your left, your left, my right, you guys can see the Elmina Castle. You see the white building?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where we go. And I say this most of the time. I might try to do the talk today, but mostly I get a bit emotional when I do, so I normally don't do it.
Yeah.
And I keep telling people this. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did happen. So what will you do about it aside from going from it? Because you can't change it. I would like you to have a look at the museum for the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
When you are done, then the tour of the dungeons begin.
Okay.
So you come with me. You can take pictures. So if you can say the other one, just say coconut. That is fine. I was born on Tuesday. Any Tuesday here?
Yep.
Ah,
Yep. Good, good.
any female Tuesday? Happening? Okay. Monday? Amma?
Yeah, when they asked me my name, that's what I took them.
Friday?
After.
Which day? Which day were you born?
I'm not sure what day it was.
Oh, you can't go with that.
Yeah.
You can't go with that. So I learned the way you check it. Now I'm doing that to say that each day a child is born comes with a name. Right? You know that. So that's what we give you. And there will be additional name also. I'll be chosen. And your second name should have a meaning. Should relate something. Right? So for example, let me use my case. I am Kondia. Now when we say Kondia, we are saying two things. Nkwa or Idua and Nkwa. Dua means tree and Nkwa means life. So tree of life.
Oh.
So as soon as you are in Accra, you're in part of the country, and you mention Kondia, everybody say, hey, this name is coming from Elmina. And then, beside that also, we have the circumstance of birth. Now, one example is when a child is born at the time that the family is doing well. There's money at home, everything seems, we can call you Inshira or Asida. Sika, that's money. Okay. Joy, energy, and that. So it's meant that the time that you were born, so you say Inshira or energy, the time that you were born, the family was doing well, there's money, everything was working out right. Yeah, the other one too, which I also, which is a bit derogatory, I don't want to go into that. but we are in a very good mood, so I want us to remain with the old lively ones. But let me start with the story once again. If we looked at the western part of Africa, or what we would say sub-Saharan Africa or West Africa, put it that way. From the time that we had various European nations started exploring our coast, which we were told was pioneered by the Portuguese. Fast forward to the time we started getting our political independence, late 1950s, 1960s. We had counted over 100 European forts and castles along the coast of West Africa, which I prefer calling them slave dungeons. Interestingly, Ghana, with a coastline a little above 500 kilometers, we had counted over 50 out of 100 forts and castles. The reason being that Portuguese who came first were dealing with gold. So everyone who wanted to compete decided to come closer. So at the moment, we have 17 of them standing that we can visit. And there are only 3 castles. When I say castle, I'm referring to the largest slave dungeons. Only 3 of them in West Africa. And all these 3 is found here. So we can't talk of Christianborg slave castle in Accra, used by the Danish. We have British slave castle in Cape Coast, a town not far from here. And then we are in the Portuguese one, Elmina Castle, built in 1482.
You said the one across the Dutch?
That's it, Danish.
Danish.
Portuguese were here in 1471, basically for 2 main reasons: to trade and also to spread Christianity. At the time, they introduced what we called barter trade. In other words, they were exchanging goods for goods. So they would come with mirror, sugar, alcohol, textiles in exchange for gold, ivory, and spices. One of the major commodities that they were so much interested in at the time, and still interested in, was gold. So at the rate they were getting it gave them an idea that gold mine is found along the stretch. So Portuguese then named or called this place Elmina, meaning the mine. But the locals couldn't say this properly, so it was corrupted as Elmina, now the name of this place. But let's look at something. I keep reminding people that it is not like Portuguese discovered this place, as we've been told in our books, that all the discoveries in the world were made by them. No, we were here before they came. Meaning that we have a name for this place. Now here is called Anum Mansa. Let's go straight. Everybody will know how to say it. Anum Mansa, meaning, can you say it? Anum Mansa, meaning inexhaustible water. Very beautiful name, right?
Yes.
But how do you get this name in most of our books? All that you will hear is Elmina. I keep telling people that, in fact, if you're an African and you keep a name that you don't understand, you need to look at it again. Because names are very important. One doesn't say, because Gabi said, it says, a nation of people without knowledge of their history, their origin, and culture, they are like tree without roots. So knowing who you are is important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, make it bold going forward. And nobody will call you any other name than yourself. You want to be yourself, and that's how we are. So, in 1482, when this castle was built, this is what the Portuguese made the locals to understand. Now, this was nothing to protect their traders, to protect the trade. So the people gave in with the construction. But in the early part of the 1500s, when the transatlantic slave trade began, was used for slave trade. At a point, people of Elmina became fed up of the activities of the Portuguese so far as the slave trade was concerned. So they wanted to get rid of them. For me, it was a mistake, but that's what they did at the time. They collaborated with Dutch, another European nation. For me, they could have done it differently, using other African whatever to do that. But they didn't do that because Dutch were not into slave trade at the time. They were thinking that are these the Messiahs sort of were coming in, slave trade will stop. It became like what we used to say, from frying pan to fire. Not from far to worse. They also expanded the structure to contain more captives. Dutch were here for 235 years. In between Portuguese and Dutch, we are talking about 325 years for slave trade. In 1807, British Parliament abolished slavery. 1814, Dutch also abolished slavery, not the trade. So the trade itself went on illegally for over 50 years.
Longer than that.
So in the 1870s, this very structure was no longer profitable for them. Dutch then sold it to the British. Now British were here from 1872 up to the time we had our independence in 1957. 1960, this is what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said when we became a republic. He said, when a black man is given the chance, we are more than capable of managing our own affairs. He's saying that his time was why. He said for about 400 years or so, our image, African personality, used to commodity, meant to be sold in the open market and so forth. So let's redeem ourselves. Let's create African personality. In fact, let's come together, saying that in unity, they knew what it was about. Collaborated with the West, have him overthrown in 1966. I'm trying to say that to mean that what the founding fathers of Africa were talking about in the 1950s, 1960s is what we are still talking about it today. So he asked the British to go back home, 1960. In fact, they did. You agree with me that today they are back in the system on the continent with a different style, a different shape, different mentality, different traits. So I was telling the group yesterday that when you see these white people on the continent, don't think that they are Father Christmas. They are not, Santa Claus. They are here to dole out, gifts. They are here for a real business.
Yes.
So it's about time that we need to find, how to engage them at that level. Because they are very consistent. So we need to know the strategies and the method that they adopt and so forth. So out of 500 years existence of this brother, nearly 400 years of its history is talking about slave trade. And this is what we are now going to look at it. Before I do, people keep asking that there were slaves in Africa before European came. People even used to say it was the Africans who sold Africans into slavery. It was the chiefs, a whole lot of them. You have heard a lot of them. But let me put this on record that Europeans were not strangers to this trade. We should also know that there is nowhere on the record which shows that also is that when the Europeans had not set foot on our soil, we were capturing ourselves, selling our people across the Atlantic to the Caribbean and the Americas as slaves. There is nowhere on the record. The first what you need to understand is that transatlantic slave trade was something which was designed by the Europeans to work out for them.
Yeah.
I will explain that. In 1492, 10 years upon the completion of this stretcher was when we were told that Columbus, some say he got drifted, but I would say he actually got lost and entered the Caribbean. When these Europeans finally got there, they had the Red Indians as a source of labor, where they were using them to work. The story continued that these Indians were dying, especially due to the diseases that the Europeans introduced. Upon a recommendation of one of the Roman Catholic priests called Bartholomew de las Casas, saying that, hey, why don't you try the Africans? So 50 Africans were sent from a place, from Lisbon, sent to a place then called Hispaniola. Now, this place has now been shared between Haiti and Dominican Republic. They got to know that comparatively our people could resist the disease much better than them. So more of our people were to be sent over there. At that time in history, Portuguese were the only Europeans in the entire West Africa operating from here. Under the blessing of the church, when I say the church, I am talking about the Roman Catholic Church. And upon a royal order under the Ascentos, they were given a license to send people from here. Some people like to say to send slaves. No, you were not slaves. You were not. Send people from here to the New World. So initially, this is what they were doing. They were moving along the coast, capturing people themselves for several decades. By the time they sat back and they got to know that the strategy that they were using was not working. So what they sought to do was to collaborate with the Africans. Let's have a conversation. For me, one of the major factors which contributed to the growth of Atlantic slave trade has to do with the nature of our system prior to the coming of the Europeans. Why am I saying that? We all know that our civilization, our history as people, never began when the Europeans set foot on our soil. We have history to tell. We have a story to tell. Remember, there was a time that this continent was described as the cradle of civilization. I can talk of Egypt, Nubia, and other civilizations that has rise up on the continent. We have had universities of higher learning on the continent. Jane, Timbuktu, and Timbuktu was described as the rare famous of learning on the continent. Let me zero in down to West Africa. Are you okay with the son?
Yeah.
Good. We have had beautiful and wonderful empires. Mali Empire, Songhai Empire, Ghana Empire, and so forth. But this is the problem. There are times we don't look at it. I have said that. One of our major problems, we all know it, as African is that we always allow our visitors to overstay their welcome. We are too hospitable.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
We embrace even our enemies. Even when they were stabbing us in the back, we say, oh, okay, it's well. When even they are holding our neck, oh, it's okay, it's fine. That's the part. So, we saw all these empires being collapsed. Why? We had Ghana Empire, that's what happened. We had the foreigners coming in to trade with us. We give them all the power, all the secrets, whatever they know. And soon, this empire collapsed. As of our own kind of survival, our own kind of resilience, that's the word. We came up with Mali Empire led by Sundiata Keita. Remember, he became #1 billionaire at the time. We saw this empire also collapsed. The same pieces. From the Songhai Empire, also collapsed. Now, what is the problem here? When these empires began to collapse, people now began to move in groups, in bits. What you may say, tribes, kingdoms, and so on and so forth. It was that same period when these Europeans came. So they were quick enough to capitalize on our deficiencies, on our
Yeah.
weakness, succeeded in setting us up.
Yeah.
We are no longer families, we are no longer brothers, rather we are enemies. So we were fighting among ourselves. Let's admit, today we have not stopped fighting. We are still fighting. If you looked or examined critically the method that they put in place prior to our enslavement was division. Divide and conquer. It was the same method they put in place prior to our colonization. So remember, in 1884, 1885, during the Berlin Conference, they sat down to divide this continent among themselves. So if you look at it today, Africans in Africa are divided, just like Africans living outside the continent. Maybe you have not this one. That speak language which is not ours. Language that we are so proud of. As Anglophone Africans, those who speak English. Francophone Africans, those who speak French. Lusophones, those who speak Portuguese. And some are so proud to say they are Arabs. This is making African integration, African unity very difficult to attain. Why unity? Because there is no unity. Forget about everything. There is no nation of people which can develop when they allow their enemies to divide them. That's what we say. United we stand.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a house divides against itself cannot stand. We have all the resources you can think of. Naturally, we are protected.
Yeah.
Gold, diamonds, whatever. Yet, this continent is described as one of the poorest. It tells you that we are not doing something correct. If we keep doing the same thing, we're going to get the same results. So going forward, let's change the system. 400 years of slavery, several years of colonization. This is our strength as people. That when all these, Africa continent remain the second populous continent on the earth. In terms of race, black people dominate the race. That is the strength. Numbers are very important. But what we do also know is that numbers without unity is nothing. That is why today we had become one of the endangered species among human beings on the earth. In Asia, they're chasing African people. In Europe, it is happening. In America, it's getting worse and worse. In the Caribbean, it's happening. Even on our own soil, we don't have that kind of recognition that we have to get from our own people. Rather, you want to salute the white person. Yes. It tells you that there is something that's required that needs to be done. We need to work out together. We are in this together, like I said. So we can sit down. Before things getting worse by day. The less of that we can do will help the system. And once more. Before we get to danger, let me give you one scenario. At the time of slavery, or Atlantic slave trade, they had 1,000 Africans in the dungeons. Above these dungeons were the residents for the Europeans. There were over 100, a little over 100 people, 120, 110, that kind of stuff. And in the outside, we have thousands and millions of our people living there. It could have been possible that we have come together and say, hey, you, this 100 people, leave this place for all these things to stop. But it's continued because we bought into the propaganda, their propaganda, that those people in the dungeons are not us. They are from different tribes. They're not from our tribe. They are different kingdoms. They are different this. So it is them, not us. So going through all this, we don't seem to care. That is how it went. So I pray that going forward, let's see the need of in our own small way, so that together we get to that point you're aspiring to. Ashe. So we're now walking the dungeon and receiving what we have. So we are at the female slave courtyard. At the time of this trade, they had 1,000 Africans in the dungeon. Like I said, 400 were female, they were here. The rest of them were on the other side being male. Now, let's walk through the dungeon so we could see it much better. This is the largest female slave dungeon. Over 100 captives were here. And let me say that captives in this dungeon were not only Ghanaians. At the time, these artificial boundaries are not being erected. So we're talking about the broader kingdoms, empires, and so forth. So today, Burkina Faso, Mali, whatever, people were captured, send them here. One would have walked for several kilometers, for several miles before getting here, such that the person is already weak. Held in chains, thinking they would escape. There were no toilets, there were no bathrooms in these dungeons. So what they did was to provide them with buckets. 5 or more people might have been chained together. So if one of them wants to move to where the bucket is, all of them must move back. So you take it that they were from different tribes that they cannot communicate. They want to do everything. Now that explains why most of them became ill, weak, waiting for the ships. When you look straight, that red hole, it connects to the margate. Some of them. All the dead bodies here were thrown in the sea. And like I said also, we could see the original floor they had at the time. There were no mattresses, there were no blankets. So for the 3 months, they were here. The doors were closed. So the only source of ventilation was through this very small space and the one you see there. Last 2 years, as part of the Year of Return project, the dungeons was open for our brothers and sisters to visit. So some of those who came laid these wreaths. You see a lot of them in memory of thousands and millions of our people who died here beyond the slave houses and so forth. So it is right and just that as we walk through this, we pay homage, show respect, and regret. So let's continue. Now, in most cases, the merchants who were getting the captives from here would like to brand them. With the branding, each merchant has its own way of doing it. Some will use alphabet numbers. They will do that on a metal. They put it in a fire, bend them, give them mark before they get on board the ship. Now please, here you need to bend until you are. I said earlier that yes, when the female came down, the captives came down, but there used to be staircase at this point. But because today we are not using the reservoir, we have done this. Say that whenever it rains, water came down this road. So at the time of slavery, there were stairs where the female came down, maybe from this point. So possibly they could see each other for the first or the last time before they head on board the ship. Please. You bend until you are through. Now, this will be the last room in the process. But I would like to draw your attention to this. From the main courtyard up to this point, you will notice that the doors keep getting smaller. It was done such a way that one person comes in at a time, so that it could be able to control, making sure that nobody escapes. And if you look at that also, there was the height of the door or the entrance, but when slave trade began, it was reduced this way. So one in, one out. Now this also is the door of no return. Initially it was a bit wider. So now people keep asking, what about if some of the captives were big? The point is that by the end of 2-3 months in the dungeon, they were lost weight. The water was much closer. Today it has receded, it's still moving backwards. So when they walk down here on the stairs, smaller boats or canoes will pick them from here to the ship, which are anchored some distance away, and then the middle passage, the journey across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, and has begun. They were already weak from the dungeons, and that explains why a lot of them died in the process. We have several records telling us the number of people who were involved, those who were captured, those who died, those who survived. One of them is saying that when you take every 3 captives, 2 die, 1 survive. Saying that some 20 million people made it.
40 million dollars.
That's correct. And the ratio 40 million died. Now this is what I keep thinking about. In our normal traditional business, the more you sell, all things being equal, higher the profits. So if you have 60 million people, 60 million worth of goods, and 40 million will go waste, then it tells you that the business you are in doesn't make sense.
Right.
But when you go through, you get some possible reason. For them, they believe that those people who go through all these difficulties, they were the best. When sent on the plantation, could work much harder. And if they had allowed them to live as normal as possible, they will revolt. So let's get them weak. That is it. Like I said, if you look around, you see a lot of reeds, bottles, whatever, being sent here by people. People like to pray to connect to their ancestors. Others like to lay wreath and so forth. So at this point, I'll give you a few minutes. Those of you who want to do same, say a word or so, you can do that. I just want to thank the walls. We'll do that before we continue. They have freedom, they could work, get properties, they could have children, the children are not slaves, they are free people, but they could become king and queens in their own right and so forth. So for us, slavery is just what I would say master servant relation. In fact, a person seems to be a slave is part of the family. So in the first place, it does not exist. But what they introduced is that these people were kept in the shackles, in the dungeons. They were not, I mean, all the privileges that they had were taken. And this was, so when you get that book, it gives you an idea what is pertaining here as opposed to what they want us to believe. So that we can be able to confront the fact as it is and not the myth that they want us to take in, book and sink in.
So the name of the book was Indigenous Slavery?
Yeah, I think it's Indigenous Slavery, yes. We have it, I think it's in the book. So please, let's move on. Sorry?
Now go ahead. Got a brown cover on that book.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
It's a brown cover.
It's a brown cover. Yeah. I think I'll get a guys to get a copy for those who want to get a copy. You can get the one and then you see the reference. Okay. I'll give a few minutes for your pictures.
Are you taking a picture of me? Jemai, I'm not even, you could at least say something. I look crazy.
Whenever the castle is on the attack, they raise it and no one comes in. We have the church.
They wasn't Christian either.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we have to stay in here?
So this is the church. Dutch Reformed Church. When you look up there, they have written Psalm 152 when it says, Zion is the Lord's resting place. This is his eternal habitation. Now, those of us who like to read from King James Version, it says, this is my dwelling place. Here I will sit enthroned, for I have desired it. And as they were here in the church, stand there, that's fine. Now, this was the balcony where an officer would use to select one of the captains. Let's go. But before we go up to the governor's quarters, at this point there's a trap door where the woman came on. The governor's bedroom. Well ventilated, so the windows are closed. But you can't get any visitors.
Wow.
Just one person.
This is crazy.
Now, before I end the talk, I would like to know if someone has a question.
Did they write about like the school? Did they have to get schools? Did they write about how they dismiss it? Oh, I don't know. Still, how did they I'm sure they did somewhere.
They did somewhere, but the point is that you were screaming, at a point where they'll get weak.
Your conscience is
And also,
just.
you know, also,
Yeah.
that they were kind of used to.
And then if you do, the whole point of slavery was to dehumanize them. So it wasn't that you were here and you felt human. They're less than you anyway, so you don't feel.
Think about how many black men in young America that they can overtake. They have people have AKs will drop it on police car. This mentality that we develop and colonize where we see them as superior girls.
Yeah.
Go kill each other.
Well, in summary, this slave castle was built by Portuguese. And when I say modern, I'm saying that they used African labor in the construction. It wasn't like they came in and put everything by themselves. In 1482, it was captured by Dutch. In 1637, with the help of people of Elmina, thinking that as Dutch were coming in, slave trade was stopped. Dutch sold it to the British when slave trade was over. But let me say that British never used Elmina Castle for slave trade. But they had used the other castle as the Cape Coast for 2 to 3 centuries for the trade also. So they were involved in it. But they were here during the colonial period, up to the time we had our independence, 1960 when we asked them to go. we have been here for 64 years, and it's still counting. So out of 500 years history, nearly 400 of it is from the slave trade.
So the slave ships that left here, were most of them going to the Americas, or did some of them go to Europe, or were all of them from here going to the Americas, or do that?
Basically, Atlantic slave trade was meant to feed the plantation that the Europeans had established in the Caribbean and the Americas. So I would say insignificant number went to Europe, like Liverpool and other places, but basically they were meant for that consumption.
So most of our direct ancestors came to you.
The coast of Elmina, along the coast of
So inside those dungeons, there were no bathrooms, so how much was snapped up?
we had to do excavation before this began. And those who have had the opportunity to see Cape Coast, you see that there were a whole lot of people and you have to get them into it. And there was even used to be a tunnel which was filled with human extraordinary. But the difference between Cape Coast and Elmina was that this was built before slave trade began. So it was a kind of a little bit better. Maybe that, but that's a bit better compared to the. So because here they have a chance to clean the place before the next batch of work. Irrespective of that, it's how some heat in the that we have to clean before. So if you go to a room next to the door of no return, you'll see something like that on the floor. So that place has been maintained. Now, when you are coming from this way, outside, the building will be very impressive with this structure and so on. But when you get in the story, it's very difficult to take in. Now, what we do here is not something to remind us of the pain, difficulties that our people went through some years ago. But therefore, this is to remind us that as Africans, we have a story to tell. And we must be interested in the story. And we should be the one telling our story. And again, our story never began when the Europeans set foot on our continent. It started way back. So narrating it, let's also acknowledge our historical past is very important. Going forward, we are still facing the challenge. The racism and other form of isms is still against us. And then it requires that we need to always recognize one thing, that we can't achieve whatever we want to achieve if we are divided. So unity is the key going forward. So, on this note, I would like to thank you for coming. I thank you for your attention. And wish you all the best. Hope to see you again. Thank you. My name is
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I did see, but I just wanted something that was like public.
Now, this was the cells for the European soldiers.
European.
Now, those who misbehaved, those who got drunk, others went out without permission, they were brought in here to be disciplined. Now, being their people, their own people, the place was well ventilated.
Yeah, I see.
So you
I'm
can see this
feeling it
place.
right here.
Let's see the other one, which is ourselves, then we know the difference.
What's the most they would keep of their?
Make sure y'all get a picture of that fire right there.
So this was the cells for the Africans. Those captives who tried to escape, those fighting for their freedom. If it were today, we will call them freedom fighters. Yes. So those identified were locked in here till death, no food, no water. Now there could be 5, 10 or more people expecting everyone to die. Naturally, it wouldn't happen at the same time. So you will look at the next person chained to you, dying or dead, which the officers had not removed. Thinking, going through the same process, thinking of the stench and so forth. You can't imagine the mental torture they had to
Your
go
faith,
through.
that is your faith.
That's your faith. That's correct. What they went. Which is why when you're coming from outside, you could see skull and a crossbone on top of it. And the writings here is Dutch.
Yep.
This was done in memory of one of the Dutch governor called Jacob van Techt. He was here during the time of Dutch West Indies Company, which came here to trade. Now, this governor came from Zeeland, a province in the Netherlands. He was the last director general responsible over the north and south coast of Africa. He arrived here on 16th of January 1758, died 12th March in the same year at the age of 41. They say he died due to yellow fever. It was number one killer among the Europeans at the time. There wasn't any cure. It was much later when quinine was introduced, and even that wasn't even effective. But there was a pastor who wrote this in a form of tribute, saying that this governor was someone who was God-fearing, who was honest, hard-working, and so on and so forth. Personally, he might have been hard-working.
He might have been what?
Hard-working?
Might have, yeah.
But how God-fearing, honest he was at the time of this evil being perpetrated in this world,
Nope.
very difficult for me to comprehend.
Yep.
And that was the church. Yes. Let me say that. The oldest Christian church in this country by Portuguese, they were Catholics. When Dutch took over, they were Protestants. So they used this as slave market, where they were auctioning slaves. Now it's a museum with the pictures of Elmina over the years. We also have this wall. There is a similar one over there. These were the additions made by Dutch to strengthen or to buttress the building. But in 1948, they were recruiting policemen, so they added those metals on top for exercise. They were climbing. Let's see these two cells before we go out. For our government in Ghana to bring the African family all over the world together, we had Panafest instituted. Later on also we had Emancipation Day, and quite recently we had the Year of Routine. Like I said, all these were tools to bring us together. But in more particular to the 1992, before that our chiefs held a ceremony here called Fihankra. Fihankra literally means that when you were going, or when our people were taken from here, they never had the chance to say goodbye. So after that, they went to the United States, precisely New York, and upon the liberation with our people over there. When the chiefs came back, this plaque came with them. So for us, as we walk through this, ought to be in the everlasting memories. Ought to be in the everlasting memory of the sufferings of our ancestors. We pray that those who died rest in peace. Those who live and want to return home find their roots. May man never be allowed to commit such crime against man.
Yes.
And we, the living, we vow to uphold this. This is urgentness, that irrespective of where we stand as this story is being told today, we carry the responsibility in ensuring that people of this kind never befall on us again. But like I said, for this to be true, each and every one of us need to recognize one thing, that we have a role to play in this struggle. Everybody needs to play his role very well, so that together, I believe that in that cause, the spirit of our ancestors will be glad to support us, so that we can get to the level we are aspiring, because we can take this again. So never again.
Never again.